Good evening. This is Cindy Goss from Futures Recovery Healthcare. And tonight we have a very distinguished, honorable member of our Heroes Ascent Advisory Board with us, Lieutenant Colonel Eduardo Suarez. How are you doing, Ed?
I'm doing great, Cindy. Nice to see you again.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. We're just checking in to see how's life in your world and thought maybe perhaps you could share with us a little bit about yourself and your start in the military personnel and where you landed today.
We'll see how well I can cover that in a few minutes. But 32 years of service so far, so there's lots happened in 32 years. I would say my career really started in the National Guard. I was active duty for a while, but when I came to Minnesota in 1993, I joined the National Guard and pursued a normal officer career as an armor officer. But it was after my first deployment in 2003 to 2004 when I first learned firsthand of what it's like to be a soldier, a military family, and to understand what those challenges can be, not just while you're deployed, but when you come back and repairing your family and putting your life back in order again. And really, it was my second deployment, which was my first deployment to Iraq in 2005 to 2007, where I think this idea of soldier care and veteran issues really came to light for me and for our family. I was gone for 22 months and spent 16 months of that time in Iraq. By and large, I would say it was a good deployment. Our mission was good. I thought the soldiers that I commanded at the time did an incredible job. But really, I think the effects of that coming back is when I really realized what the challenges and what the trauma involved with deploying could be for some people. And when I got back, I got involved with Minnesota's Beyond the Yellow Ribbon program, which started as a Minnesota program, became a nationwide initiative where it really was about developing program and assistance before, during, and after deployments. And I was with that program for almost 4 years and had a chance to have a positive impact on families and soldiers and airmen of the Minnesota National Guard. And in doing that, I learned about myself. I learned a lot about the soldiers I served with in 16 months, and I realized that some were struggling with PTSD, a number of issues, substance abuse, and going through that journey with them. I also got to see Minnesota become the state that it is today. That we have a very robust, engaged support network for veterans of all branches of service in Minnesota. I feel very fortunate to be living here, and I've seen firsthand the impact that assistance can have, both with our services at both the city and the county and state level, as well as this incredible network of volunteers, Cindy, that you can find anywhere in Minnesota at the city and county level, where people who just have an open heart, a connection to veterans and families who want to help and be there in their time of need. So it's been a really neat journey for my military experience, probably experience that a lot of people don't necessarily have, but I've benefited from. My last couple of assignments, I was in charge of recruiting for Minnesota, so I got to see firsthand the enlistment of the newest members of the National Guard, these young men and women in their late teens, raising their right hand to swear an oath. And now recently, I'm now director of diversity and inclusion for the Minnesota National Guard. So, like I said, I've had a long, distinguished career, some amazing opportunities and assignments. But when I look back at the collective experience, I feel like I've had a calling in terms of understanding the needs of service members and their struggles and connecting them to help that they need. Because I've had soldiers personally affected by their experiences, and I've seen the needs in the community at large. So yeah, it's been a great ride so far, Cindy.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I know when you mentioned about, the reintegration program, as well as I do that the reintegration process isn't what it is. And it's oftentimes difficult for our soldiers to come home to their families, regardless of the length of time that they've been deployed. Things change. They come back to children that were born where they were home and now they've never met before, or their housing is different, their job is different. And so they've changed. And now they're coming back into an environment that they're trying to integrate. And it's not usually that simple for them. It's very difficult if they don't have someone like you or other programs that help to navigate that process.
No, it's true, and I think as leaders, we have to recognize that not everyone has that same set of skill sets, that same level of resiliency to navigate through those different challenges. And just knowing there's a support network there is one thing, but also equally important is ensuring the service members knows that the network is there. And oftentimes that's a problem where they're not aware. Even just yesterday, I met someone at a nonprofit function and was talking about Minnesota benefits, and he was also in the Minnesota National Guard, and didn't realize we had all these opportunities for assistance. And so that's always the same challenge, Cindy, is making sure that people are aware of what's actually available to them.
Well, I know with most first responders, there's the stigma attached to asking for help. Do you find that true also for your soldiers?
I do, not only just for the service member, because families of service members, military families, we're very proud families, Cindy. And so asking for help is just hard to do. But even for soldiers that deal with specific PTSD and trauma, mental health, even more difficult for some. But I do believe it's changing. And I think early on in our relationship, I think I introduced to you this idea of breaking the stigma. It was a campaign that we pushed through the Minnesota Guard where we had senior leaders and general officers reaching down to every single service member to convey this message of it's okay to get help. And the best way to do that is when leaders themselves acknowledge their own personal experience and struggles and share that with people. When you humanize that need for help, I think that's when you really connect and say, it's okay to get the help when the help is there if you need it.
Especially coming from a command officer such as yourself, it really sets the tone.
It
Because if you
does.
believe and you support this, they will feel that. And then they feel the ability to continue to get that support or reach out to other resources available.
Yeah, I mean, words is one thing, but actions speak a lot louder than words, and that's not cliche. It really is true. When they see you, what the things that you do physically, that supports that idea that seeking help is okay. That's when it resonates most with service members.
Absolutely. When you see your soldiers reintegrating and in your years of experience, what do you see as the predominant issues coming back that you find them experiencing?
I think the first issue is an acknowledgement that they need help transitioning. I think a lot of them think that I don't need help, everything's good. My spouse held down the fort while I was gone. In fact, I even see that that's more prevalent in people who are in their second and third deployments because they think they've checked that block. Hey, I've done it one time. I've ridden this bike before. I'll just get back on it again. And I think that's one of the fallacies that are out there. And reality is, I think that, and speaking for myself, you can ask Jennifer. Every deployment had its own unique set of challenges and the experience we had to learn through, and they were not necessarily the same. Certainly, we learned things in previous ones, but I don't think we made the assumption that we had it all figured out.
As far as the impact on families, what would you highlight as to the impact on the families when they return back, the wives, significant others, their children, their regular family
I
members?
think the biggest impact I see, regardless of your experience in deployments, regardless of your ability to communicate and set expectations either before and during and after deployment, it's the redefining of roles and responsibilities. I think that's one of the biggest challenges is, why that spouse was deployed, the other spouse picked up the slack and took care of everything, right? And so when they get back, you've got a person who's been on deployment, probably under some level of stress the whole time, making decisions. That person gets back, is done making decisions. The spouse has been home all the time making decisions. So you see there's this that who's going to let go and how you're going to reestablish those roles again. I think that's the biggest challenge for a lot of families.
And also with their children, getting reacquainted with their children, because sometimes they don't have Zoom available or FaceTime available. It might just be a phone call. And after a long period of a time with deployment, there's a disconnect that can occur.
There is, and that actually has changed over the last 20 years from my first deployment in 2003 to talking to soldiers who just got back from the last deployment in the last few months. The connection piece is actually drastically different. My first one, it was a phone call once a week, right? Every other week, no video calls. And now, Cindy, it's like you and I. I mean, I think there's some families corresponding almost every single day. So I think that piece has helped a little bit. I think what you don't have is you don't have those true intimate conversations necessarily you'd like to have. So there's still a disconnect there, but that visual connection with children from what I'm understanding, has actually gotten better over the years. But what you miss out on of those is personal experiences, you miss the football games, you miss the activities, you miss that person developing and growing that you would see normally at home. That part can't be replicated experience overseas.
Well, I know too, working in New York State, for example, we have one of the highest contingencies of reservists that work in law enforcement, especially corrections. And I know when they're overseas and in combat, and then they return home and they're given a different service weapon, even psychologically, they find some difficulties switching from the streets of Iraq, for example, and then
Mhm.
coming back and doing road patrol. And then a different whole weapon that they're using compared to what they had. And so sometimes we will offer additional, just let's go have fun and shoot your weapon, just so
Mhm.
that you can get back accustomed to something that you're not using because you're no longer at war.
No, that's a great point. I think I saw both fellow soldiers who took the time to transition properly. I had some folks who went back to work right away, and they had the hardest time making that transition from, like you said, patrolling the streets in Iraq to sitting in office somewhere. They just couldn't make that mental shift right away. They thought they could, and so that's a real transition change that a lot of folks go through, whether it's law enforcement to military or almost any occupational change. There is a distinct transition that has to happen, and I think those who give yourselves time to do it properly are most successful doing it.
Absolutely. And then one of the hardest issues to deal with is the high level of suicides per day. And this is across the country on all programming, and so I'm wondering what your thoughts were. I know we've done past conferences together where we've addressed the suicide rate amongst our soldiers.
Yeah, and we lost one of our soldiers. I was a commander of a small unit at 70 soldiers, and we lost one person to suicide, one person to some very reckless behavior. And when I look back on those times and talking to our fellow soldiers about, we were kicking ourselves pretty hard. Like, how do we miss this thing? How do we not know our own soldier? Um, when I look back at those times and I look back at other folks I know that have taken their lives, um, signs are there. Sometimes they're more apparent than other cities. Sometimes it's a matter of how well you know your folks. I think we've learned a lot since then too. I think we understand the signs better now, at least on the military side of the house. And I think it's a combination of things. Knowing your people really, truly, more beyond the uniform, but what's inside of them, what are they thinking? That's one of the challenges. Two is what's a relationship like? Are they open to you? Are they able to share their struggles? So I think there's a number of things that go into that. But leaders or fellow soldiers who experience firsthand losing a fellow soldier, it's very tough because you almost take some personal responsibility for not acknowledging, why didn't I see the signs?
Right.
Uh, I don't think we're always going to see it, Cindy, but I do think we have a better understanding of what it is. And I think people who are more connected to the individuals that they serve with are probably more apt to pick up on those signs. That's my personal experience.
When I started in my career, I was working with Vietnam veterans and then working through all these different centuries of what we're doing, what's next, which war are you fighting this time, the dynamics with that. They all tend to have the same narrative. They want to trust somebody,
Hmm.
and they want somebody to be honest with them, to telling them the truth, what they think or not think, and being supportive at the same time. But I also feel the sense of normalcy. They don't have a sense of normalcy, and all they want to do is feel normal. And so sometimes programs, when they integrate into different programs, whether it's mental health or substance abuse, that they're looking for that balance, because you need them together to be able to communicate with their peers because they're going to understand the most, but yet don't want to feel separate from everybody else because they already feel separate. They already feel different. They already feel like they're not included. And all they want is to be normal. I want to eat where everybody eats. I'll go for a walk when everybody else walks. I don't want to be selected over into a corner for a specific task. They just want a sense of normalcy again.
Yeah, and I think the connection piece is really important. I think their idea of normalcy is being around folks who are like them they can relate to. I can remember going back from my second deployment, and I remember being around people, and I felt like I just didn't fit in anymore. I didn't feel like I belonged. I felt like even if they wanted to know my experience, they couldn't even relate to it. So why even bother tell them? And I think for folks who are struggling with PTSD or substance abuse, it's important they're around people like them where they can share their experience because they're going to understand each other on a level that you and I just can't. And I think it's really, really important to have that.
Oh, I agree 100% because peer support to me is critical because who better would understand what you've gone through than one of your peers? And when you're looking at, I think the average is 22 potential suicides a day,
Hmm.
which is just crazy for me to even comprehend because we have help available. We have places for them to go. Are they asking? Do they know what's available? Are they trusting the programs that they're going to? So it's like, how can we do things differently and how can we help? And so when you look at specialized programmings, whether it's through the VA center, whether it's from outreach programs, whether it's through a program like Futures Recovery Healthcare's Heroes Ascent, that it basically was designed by a military veteran for military veterans, which makes a difference because you're talking to someone that can say, I really know how you feel, because
Hmm.
most can say, I know what you feel and how you were out on the, on the war streets that you were working. But then looking at if they don't handle that well or make good decisions and will turn to self-medication, then we start getting an increase of alcohol abuse,
Right.
dependency, prescription medications, sometimes illegal medications when the prescription runs out. How do you see that changing or evolving, or how that could be addressed, that could be easier for them to accept help?
Well, there's a certain kind of rapport that we have between military to military. Having been in that culture, I think the way I talk to other service members is now how I would talk to you, Cindy. Right? I feel like I can be pretty abrupt, and if I need to be, I think I can balance that kind of assertive approach to someone, but always balance with empathy as well. Um, you know, I don't have to treat them with kid gloves necessarily. I can be brutally honest with them. Um, and I think that's unique for military. And I imagine it's the same thing for law enforcement. We have a certain way we talk to each other that only we can talk to each other in that same manner. Does that make sense? So
It does, because there's already a developed rapport and trust between each other and
yeah,
respect. So no matter what you say and how you say it, they know it's not coming from a malicious point. It's coming from, I care for you, but you need to sit down and listen.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's where this is why it's important to have peers involved in these programs or people who've experiences or are from that culture because I don't know how you can relate. So when it comes to providing these services and opportunities, they may not get past what you're trying to say until they have that trust with you to begin with. And I think you have to have that first thing to open that door.
And if you walk in the door and there's somebody like a peer sitting in front of you right away, that
Hmm.
helps that invitation to a little bit further than that front door, I think, because they're like, I'm talking to somebody like me, and I think they know and understand me at this point. But I'm also an educator, and I think education is critical. And we had produced a program that would address stress, critical stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, suicide strategies, coping mechanisms, but also helping them to identify when they begin to have some of these meltdowns so they know what to do. So the goal is, the worst time is to find out about trauma is when you're right in it. And so sometimes educating them to know this is what happens after you're in a trauma situation helps them to better understand. And like good old Phil says, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. And so I think education is important, which we implemented that into our program to help them more understand, as well as understanding the family dynamics. We have a great family program coordinator who's a former Marine, and he understands, and so does his family. So that relationship is much more helpful. And I know what your role is assisting us, is letting us know you know, what's going to be important moving forward,
Mhm.
and letting us know like changes that you think that could be helpful to enhance the program as we move forward. And again, what I'm doing and what you are doing is saving lives. And, we want people to know, regardless where they go, seek the help. There's
Mhm.
800 numbers everywhere, even on Facebook. Reach out, call someone who can navigate you to the next spot.
Mhm.
And we're one of those spots that's available that we feel is very conducive to giving them the privacy and the confidentiality and the specialized care to navigate this, because we want them to go home. We want them to have decent, healthy lives as they move forward, as they work through some of this trauma. So I appreciate you taking your time this evening and talking with us about our program at Futures Heroes Ascent. And we can't thank you enough as well for your service to our country.
No, thanks, Andy. It's an honor to be part of Futures program, and I just know that what the work is being done there is going to make a huge impact on so many different people's lives. So I'm just proud to be part of it. So thank you.
You are very welcome. And with that said, I wish you well. God bless, and we'll stay in touch.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Take care.
Oh, you're welcome.
Bye bye.